Hello, it's Angie from Canterbury Trails Farm, and I have a treat for you today. As if you watch some of my videos, you know I like old magazines and old needlework magazines and housekeeping magazines for the most part. And I got this Home Needlework November 1915 magazine not too long ago at an antique store, and I just loved the full color project picture on the front. Usually some sort of scene or something charming that I always like, but this was really cool. This intrigued me. So I went through the magazine and I found the article. So for that full color picture, the article is just the top half of the page. Essentially what it says is, hey, we gave you a color photograph. Figure it all out for yourself. So there was no pattern. It just says this bag has been produced in color and shown on the cover of the magazine. It can be readily copied from the cover. This will show clearly where each shade is placed. Tells you that the material they used was Ada canvas. Tells you that the lining of the bag extended above it and formed the upper part of the bag. And a wide hem at the top and a casing for the strings. Then down here there were some color suggestions for the floss. That they were 20 cents a piece for the silk cord drawstrings, and you could buy the fabric from them already cut for 50 cents, and each of the embroidery flosses were 15 cents, and that if you ordered the Ada cloth from them, it was not going to come stamped with this pattern. I went and figured out the pattern. It's cross stitch, so it's not that complicated. It's a very nice, simple pattern. Reminds me sort of an early American sort of motif, like you'd find on a sampler, embroidery sampler. So I sat down. I didn't have any. I know they made paper for making charts, but I didn't have any, and I like to do things with what I've got. So I went to the homeschool cabinet. And I pulled out just an ordinary paper, graph paper, and I figured out, holding it up to the fabric, that each regular graph paper square equaled a grouping of 4 squares on the Ada fabric. So I was able to figure it out that way. By trial and error, and you see that this side came out really good. I did a side at a time. But this side, for some reason, I kept having problems with it, and I think it's because of where it was lining up on the grid paper. It wasn't exactly the same, but I've reproduced, I made this, and I've made the patterns, and I've reproduced them in a PDF, so I can post the links down below, and you can go upload, download, whatever, the PDF, and you'll have the pattern and the instructions and everything. I also typed up the instructions and included them on the pattern. And the whole project is the size of, I just used a piece of typing paper, regular 8.5 by 11 paper to start my design, and it's going to end up smaller than that when you sew it. And I thought it would be just it's just called Bag with Cross Stitch Design was the title, and that's exactly what it is. You have your outer fabric, you have a lining fabric, and then this is going to attach to one of the pieces of the outer fabric. So when I went and stitched it up the first time, I used this other kind of green. It was more of an olive green. It was more true to the decade of the 1900s and the 20s, this sort of, I don't know, chartreuse, or not so much of a green. It's sort of like a light olive. But anyway, and I made a few mistakes over here with the charting that I realized. And at the time I'd also left out a leaf, which I went back and added later after I did the sample. And that's the reason why you do, when you make a new chart, you do the sample first. So I was able to fix the problems that went on in the original sample in this new one. And I switched to like a mint, more of a mint green, or a very light sort of forest green. I liked it better. Let me see if I can get them both here. Than the olive green for some reason, or whatever that is. I just liked the mint green better. So I had 2 of them. So I thought, originally I was making it as a gift for my daughter. So like when I leave things, out from Santa, or Santa leaves things, we always leave a few things out from Santa, and I thought this would be cute left out. So I always try to make something handmade for usually my girls. I mean, it's not a lot I make for the boys, unless I'm making PJ pants or something, and socks and hats and that kind of stuff. But they usually get something handmade from me in their Christmas sock. So since I had the one that I was doing for her, but I had the extra one, so it turned out well. So I thought, well, let's make 2 of them so each girl could have one. And I think that they're just a good little bag for cosmetics, or, you know, putting, I don't know, whatever, doodads in. You know, they're small. It's just got to be a nice size bag. So I came up with the chart, which is also the half of the pattern, and then the actual pattern and the instructions are all on there. And I've also scanned the 1915 cover. I did a pretty extensive search, and I could not find any new transfer of the copyrights of this magazine. So I'm pretty much think it is no longer owned by anybody, and since it is so old, here it was, the trademark was 1879. So even by the standards of this magazine, the trademark hadn't been, it was pretty old. So I'm pretty sure it's public domain. There are no scans of it out there. I didn't find anything really at all very much about the magazine. So it's a safe bet that picture, and I didn't copy any of the articles or anything, and I worked the chart myself, so there we have it. So what I did was I went and cut. I'm going to do the lining fabric. And this bag is simple enough that if you don't have a machine or you prefer hand sewing, you could actually work this by hand. In fact, I was tempted to do it, but then I think maybe I'll just do it on the machine. So I chose, if you're familiar with the Aunt Grace type fabrics, where they're sort of reproductions of feed sack fabrics. So I chose 2 light, small print cotton fabrics for the lining, just to give it a little bit of oomph. And on the outside, I have this. It's some sort of silk blend. I can't remember. I think it's, you know, it's like a mint green. It's got a sheen to it. So I was excited about that. So what I'm going to do, and I cut mine. Let me explain the process before we get started. Alright, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to complete your needlework, obviously. And I had a big sheet. I think I used 14 count. And I had a big sheet of it, and then I cut it to the pattern. And you want to make sure you leave enough, because we're going to fold these edges under, and we're going to sew it onto the fabric. We're going to fold these, and I'm going to fold them under, pin them, and iron it so it will be nice and flat when I'm sewing it, because the fabric, the canvas that you stitch on, is a little stiff. So you want to complete your needlework. Then we're going to use the pattern to cut the 4 pieces of your liner and your outer piece. And if like I said, I don't know if it's going to work, we'll see. I'll have to, I just cut it as one piece and folded it, whatever you want to do. Then you want to make sure you cut your cloth to fit, and remember it's just going to be the half, so you don't want the whole thing. Then we're going to iron and pin and sew the needlework to the bottom half of the front of the outer fabric. I'm going to iron all that and all that. Then we're going to sew the liner bag, and when we do that, we're going to leave the top 2 inches unsewn, because we're going to have a casing on this bag, and we also are going to sew the top edges together inside out, like a bag on each side. And did a little sketch. So it's going to be the outer bag, the lining bag. We're going to sew around the top. We're going to leave a hole. We're going to reach in and pull it inside out, and then we're going to push that liner. It'll work. We're going to push the liner down into the outer bag, so when you look into it, you're looking at the right side of the fabric in the liner. And then we're going to work on that casing. So we want to make sure we leave that 2-inch hole, an unsewn part here, because this will be a hole when it's all done. And when we're getting close to the edge, we'll sew part of that closed, and then we'll turn the edges under on the top part of it, and that's going to be our casing where the cord goes through. Now the original Home Needlework cover showed it with cords coming out both sides, but I'm just going to do the cords coming out one side, and we're not going to mess with the double cord. I like the double cord, but it just simplifies matters if you have a single cord. You can also put a toggle on the cord if you want. I had some various ideas for a cord. I have this one, which I need to do a little bit of repair on it. You know, remember I saved these kind of doodads all the time. So I'm going to fix, after I fix that one, see it needs to be, I got one cord, so I'll use that one. On the other one, I have these two maroon tassels, and I was thinking about using this. It's almost like it's a trim, and it has like flowers, so that might work. If that trim doesn't work out, and the maroon doesn't really match, I guess on this one it's purple. It matches the burgundy in the stitching, but not really the covers. But I have this gold ribbon. I like this gross grain. What I'll probably end up using is this gold gross grain ribbon. Both of my prints that I picked have like a golden yellow flower. And then I have this one tassel here that has all the little colors, and it matches well with that. So that's probably what I'm going to end up using. First thing I'm going to do is just pin my bag pieces here. Now I'm going to see if I can manage doing the, without having to cut separate here. I'm going to trim this off. And in cutting, if you've worked with sewing Aida cloth, you know it has a tendency to unravel. So I always cut it a little bit larger than I need it. And I'm just going to give it a good crease there. Okay. Now I'm going to that's just for the top. Now for the bottom, yeah, I'm going to have to, okay, so I am going to have to cut my bag if I'm going to sew it the way I want to sew it. So let me, so what I'm going to do, the only edge I really have to worry about folding under is this top edge, because the rest of the edges will be taken up in the seam. But this top edge we're going to sew on here. And I also want to make sure it is centered where I want it. Now in the picture they went ahead and put the very edges, let me show you the difference what I did. They sewed the very edges on the bag, but when I was tooling around with it, to me it was very stiff, and I also saw when you sewed it the potential for the fabric to unravel on the seam or to pull apart from the lighter fabric underneath of it, especially with use, because the fabric is much more flexible than the stitching material. I just felt like after time this is going to tear away from the fabric. So to compensate for that, I thought let's make the design a little smaller so it's not the full bag, so it's just like a panel on the front of the bag, and center it so it has plenty of the Aida fabric around the design, so if it starts to unravel, there's a possibility that you could actually go in and remedy it by sewing your bag a little smaller. It would be work, but at least you'd have a little bit to save. On this, if you did it right on the edge and it pulls apart, you could hand sew it to repair it, but your fabric is going to be damaged and you're going to lose your stitchery. So to me, I would rather have an object that I could repair and continue to use if it comes to that. So what I need to do here is make sure my stitching fabric is straight across. Now on the download, I listed the colors of floss I used were not exactly what they used. I sort of pulled all my floss out and lined it up against this color picture to match it. And as a result, because I buy all different kinds of brands, things ended up being different brands. So let me tell you what I used. And this is also printed on the instructions on the pattern in the PDF. I used Iris brand, which I don't know what that is. It could have been an old brand. I don't know. It could have been a craft brand, whatever. Iris 368, and it was a burgundy. DMC 3053 was the green, like a mint green. DMC 799 was the blue. Craftways 122 was sort of this pink. And Craftways 932 was the red. So it only has the 5 colors. And I used, in the book, in the magazine, they used an ecru. This is sort of like a, it's not exactly a white. It's almost got a bluish tint to it, but it's white. I had two identical pieces of it. And so I thought, well, I'm going to use that because I knew I wanted to do a sample, and I knew I wanted one that I actually started, ended up using. So, and it was a flat sheet and not folded. Some of those ones that come folded. Of course, they make the ones rolled now too. So I have my stitching on there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch straight across. That will be the only visible seam. These are going to get, I'm going to go around it, but those are going to get sewn into when I put the other piece on and sew the bag. So they're not going to be seen. Now don't worry if it feels like it's not centered, because remember up here we're going to be taking up, there's going to be seams around it, there's going to be seams on top, and then we're going to have a casing up there, so it'll work out in the end there. Alright, first of all I'm just going to sew my bags, since they're the easy thing here. And remember, I'm going to leave the top 2 inches not sewn. And also, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I like to sew. If I'm not doing a French seam, I like to sew and then go around and do a zigzag on the edges just to give the item extra strength. I want it to be fully functional, and I want it to last for a while. Okay, so I got my 2 liners done. So my bag, the first thing I'm going to do, get this bag on there, get the needlework on there. So I just pick one of the little sewing lanes to go down there. Okay, and you can see it's, the top is, it's, you know, it's like invisible so you don't see it. So it just stays where I want it. Pin. I want to make sure my bag matches the side that I'm going to leave the thing. Okay. So again, leaving my top 2 inches unsewn. I want to sew around. I am going to trim a little bit. Just a little though. Like I said, because it's going to get used, and if you're putting cosmetics and stuff in it, it's going to be heavily used and abused. So leave a little extra fabric so you can go around and do that zigzag or serge. I'm going to do them. Next thing we want to do, I'm going to take the right sides of each fabric. By right sides, I mean the correct print, like you would be looking at it. And we're going to pin it. Pin the two edges, the edges of the top edges of each bag. We go around, we're going to pin all these together. If your lining bag ends up looking like it's a little larger than the outer bag, it's okay. Just try to compensate as well as you can. If you need to, you could always go around and take up one of the sides again on the liner. The liner's going to poke down in there, so it's not going to be real visible. So what you'll need to concentrate is on your top edges. And so I am lining up where my 2-inch opening is. I'm making sure those are the first things I have that I've pinned those two things, so I can work sort of out and around now after that. Mine lines up pretty well. I might just need a little tuck right there and it'll be fine. Okay, so you see that I have, this is what I was talking about earlier. We're looking at the inside out, the wrong sides of the fabric, of both the outer layer, our stitching is inside, and our liner. Now I want to make sure I'm back on straight stitch. And I'm sewing down a little bit more. My directions, I think, say to you just sewing about 1/4 of a seam. I am sewing just a little bit more because of this satiny fabric. I don't have a lot of confidence in it. I wish I wouldn't have used it now, but done deal. It'll look pretty. Okay, so now we have sewn together inside out liner and the inside out front, and we're going to reach through this 2-inch hole, and we're going to reach up in there, and if you can't get your hands in there, you can use some tweezers or tongs of some sort. Okay, I've ironed my, it's all turned right side out, and I've ironed my lining. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull apart that outer bag down there. I'm going to work my lining fabric down into it. Push it down there. Well, we still have this 2-inch hole over here, so you can sort of use that, put your finger in there and help manipulate it if you need to. I'm going to go, we have the liner down inside, I'm going to go iron my edges so they're nice and crisp. You can see the liner is down inside there. There's the outside of my bag. Let me go iron that top part real quick. I ironed my top edge so it's nice and got a crisp edge to it now. So here's what the little bag looks like so far. And I didn't get this exactly center, as you can see. So the next one, this is, remember, this is my sample one. So my next one, I'll try to move it over. I don't think it's going to be, you know, just detract from the overall finished product. I mean, it's just a little off center. So now what I'm going to do, and this is where our little sleeve thing is going to come in handy. I just want to go, I also took advantage, I should add this, when I was ironing, to turn my, in the 2-inch hole that we had left here, to turn my edges inside so I don't have any raw edges here. Now I'm going to do a top seam just a little bit down from the Okay, now I want to make a casing, and on the directions I may have been thinking that we were going to use that top seam as the top of the casing. You can do that and just do one, go down a 1/2 inch and just do one more and your casing will be done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly hand sew. First of all, just like the top, very top of the bag, I'm going to do the liner first here. This is what I did. So there's the top. Left the little hole there. I just hand stitched this top about 1 inch and left an inch hole. Okay, and it's open because to the inside, if I wanted to poke my finger in between the layers, I could do that because that's where the casing's going to go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, having done that, I want to mark my hole. I don't want to accidentally sew those up in any way, so I'm going to mark the hole with pins, just as a constant reminder. Now I'm going to slide this under. I'm going to have to move my pin a little bit. So directly above the hole, I'm going to go straight across and just do a seam, straight stitch again. This will be the top of the casing. So there's the top of the casing. So this is the part that's going to be like when I pull those cords, it's going to get all ruffled up there. So the little hand part that we did is really going to be lost in that ruffle. Still try to do it as neat as possible, but Alright, now I want to slide my bag in again, and I want to find just the very end of that 2-inch hole there. And I want to go around, and I'm going to do it. Now this, I want to make sure I keep my fabric nice and smooth, which would be a lot easier had I chosen cotton. Okay, so now I have a casing, and the casing is just a tunnel where elastic or a cord or something, drawstring, goes through. So that's what we've got. And we have our hole. It's open to the inside of the bag. We didn't sew it. That's where our casing, our cord is going to go through there. So let me get the cord. All right, I settled upon this gross grain ribbon as my cord. So you're going to need 2 safety pins. Well, I got this because I'm going to add my little tassel to the end of mine, so I'm going to use the needle and thread to do that. So the first thing you want to do is you want to, I usually do a double through the thing like that, pin it on there, and you're going to pin this to the outside of the casing. Maybe, it's like my pin is flat, there it goes. And then we're going to take another one and you're going to pin it to the other end of the ribbon. And the reason why we're doing this is going to keep it, when I start to feed this part through the casing, through the fabric, I can feel this. It's big enough, it's small enough to fit through the casing, but it's big enough that I can feel it through the fabric as I feed it through. This one is going to keep it joined to the outside so it doesn't, I don't accidentally pull it, all the work that I've done here, I don't pull it through all the way through and pull it out. I'm just going to feel for that safety pin in the casing. I'm going to push it through. Now, a common problem is, and the good reason why it's always good to iron, is when you got a seam on the inside on both sides, sometimes your seams can get overlapped and then your pin hits it. How you have to fix that is either you have to keep working on it until you can wiggle it between the 2 fabrics, if you're lucky, or you have to pop a stitch somewhere and you have to push a needle through and then re-sew. It's a small casing, doesn't take long to get it on through there. Undo your pins. Pull both your ends together and pull, so you want to try to even that out. Now I'm going to trim. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure they're even. Flat, you want to make sure it's flat. And I'm going to tie, keeping my ends together as much as possible, tie a nice knot. And I'm going to do it as tight as I can. I'm going to trim those off just a bit because I want to attach this tassel. Got these from Darn Good Yarn, and might have been Globin. I can't remember. You would check for both. But it's just a set of tassels, and they each have a little bit of string, and there's different colors. I could have picked one of those, but I wanted to try to stick with the same. I have a thing with sticking with the same colors so as the ribbon. Sew that knot flat against this tassel. It'll work. I'm leaving the little flap at the back just in case something happens, and if we draw it up, always wrap it around if you wanted to and pull it through. bag. There's the bag. Again, like I said, you could put toggle on it too, which I might do on the other one to help keep it shut. Okay, on the second bag, I decided to do something a little different. Well, first of all, I went against what I had formerly said about wanting everything to match, and I just picked out these two tassels that sort of match this. And I'm going to use a toggle on this one. So push down the toggle, feed the cord through it. So that way when to adjust my strings, I'm going to pull down on it first of all because my strings are a little uneven, so I'm trying to get them. There we go. Okay. So that's going to hold those. So this will allow me to sew a tassel on each end, and what I'm going to do, so I'm going to fold it up enough so I can double the tassel under so I don't have any raw edges. I'm just looping around. It has a little loop on there. Okay, so on that bag, tassels on it. And so to open it, you just squeeze the toggles. I have the inside of that one too. So we had the two different styles. I got the toggle one and one that just has drawstring. And I think they turned out pretty good. So those were the two bags that I did. And here is the original for comparison's sake. And like I said, I left more fabric around it to ensure that the fabric didn't rip. I just foresaw a little bit of ripping possibility with the seams and the Aida fabric being so close to the seam, and no way to repair it if it rips, because the fabric would rip right into and fray right into your stitchery. So you can do whichever one you want, but I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. This one they lined with the same fabric, but I liked lining it with the different fabric. I just think it made a little bit a pretty edge at the top. You can see the different fabric, but not so much that it detracted from the stitchery. And also I liked adding the little tassels, the different tassels to the ends. I hope that this was a fun thing. I had a lot of fun charting this pattern from the November 1915 Home Needlework Magazine, and it took me a while to figure out the sort of the dot pattern on the inappropriate paper. But once I got it done and test sampled and got that stitched up, it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad you could join me making the bag. And cross stitch is a really simple procedure, and I haven't done a video on that, but maybe I can do that sometime in the future. So this has been Angie, and thank you for joining us today at Canterbury Trails Farm. Bye!